Well, one of the turning points in the public perception of the named person scheme was when it was discussed on BBC's Question Time in Aberdeen last year. Jim Sillars, former deputy leader of the SNP, of course, he was a member of the panel that night. He criticised the scheme. He appealed to his colleagues to think again. That kind of independent-mindedness is what makes him popular across the political spectrum. And we're honoured to have him here today. Jim, please come and speak to us.
It also makes you unpopular. When I was going on to Aberdeen at that Question Time, I knew this would come up. So I thought I'd better read the Act. And when I read it, I was appalled. And I was appalled for philosophical reasons. I'm like Kevin. I'm a socialist. I've been all the days of my life and been well on the left. And there is a genuine difference of opinion between the right spectrum in politics and the left spectrum. The right does not want the state to use its great potential powers. It prefers a smaller state. On the left, we tend to look for a very strong state. And I would argue that there are times when you need a strong state. If you look at the history of the National Health Service and how it was formed, without the government as the instrument of a strong state, we would not have a National Health Service. You needed a strong state to impose compulsory education, for example. But we on the left have got to understand that there has to be limitations of what a strong state is employed for. And I have this philosophical objection to this legislation. Because if you're going to have a genuine free country, you have to accept an enormous diversity of views. But above all, in a democratic free society, the anchor is the family. Now, we use the word the family, but there isn't a single model of a family that anyone can point to. We are all different. We bring our children up broadly the same, but not exactly the same. And even within a family, there are differences. In fact, my old man, had this been in, would have been up before whatever panel it is, yet they haul him too. Because my brother liked to go to the Palais dancing on a Saturday night. Didn't he? I love books. And I remember one night, it stuck in my memory forever, my brother was off to the Palais and I was reading a book. And the old man said, "There's something wrong with you." And when I looked up the Act and saw this word respect, I said he didn't respect me. And it's when I looked at the definition of well-being. Now, I once attended a lecture by a professor of law who said the first thing you have to understand in legislation that all words are ambiguous. And well-being is a very ambiguous word. We've already seen illustrations of it. What's the difference? Well-being and welfare. So I went to section 96 of the Act to find the definition of well-being. And it says that the assessment of well-being will be based on whether it is being promoted, safeguarded, supported, affected, or subject to an effect. But that's not enough, I found. It goes further in subsection 2. The assessment of well-being by reference to the extent it is or would be safe, healthy, achieving, nurtured, active, respected, responsible and included. And as Aidan said, This is sociological language, whereas in fact an act of a parliament has to be in legal language. So this act, as far as when I read it, I couldn't believe it. It certainly wouldn't have passed this way when I was at Westminster as a Member of Parliament, where we would subject every single line and clause to examination. And the problem we have with this Act actually goes much further than this Act. How is it possible to produce such legislative incompetence? The problem is, it's a 3-day week Parliament that starts at 9 o'clock and finishes at 5 o'clock. This Act, the whole Act, has 103 sections and 5 schedules. They restrict the discussion to 4 or 5 minutes at a time in plenary sessions. How can you expect an act of this particular kind to be examined properly and passed in a competent way? It hasn't happened, and it's not only this act, by the way, others are deficient as well. But this one says that you're going to have a named person for a family. And when I looked at the definition of well-being, I don't care what anyone says, no named person can carry out the responsibility under the Act unless they're intrusive in the family. It is impossible if you look at these definitions. Is the child being nurtured properly? You have to go through the front door to start questioning. You have to do that with every single definition. So this Act is seriously deficient. I've been asked by the organisers, what advice would I give people to tackle MSPs? Well, actually, you're in a happier position than you were before the election, because there's a number of people now at Holyrood who are not guilty as far as this Act's concerned. They've just come in. So they'll be much more open-minded to you talking to them. And my advice is go along and want to meet the MSPs personally. See the whites of their eyes when you go through the legislation and ask them to justify this. I've also been asked, finally, if I would give some advice to the government. My advice would be to do a Hammond. Last week, the government at Westminster was in a hole. It had the brains to stop digging. And my advice to this government is, this isn't going to work. This is going to be a punishment on you over the years ahead. Stop digging, get out of the hole and abandon it.